Sound check, 1, 2, 3, 4. Second mic, 1, 2, 3, 4. Good morning, dear friends, and welcome. I think this may sound a bit loud. What do you think? Is it a bit echoey? No? Isn't it weird? Oh well, maybe it's my ears. Hello to those of you joining us out in internet land? Well, it's a treat to be sitting here. Anybody here for the first time? 1, 2. Welcome. I hope this turns out to be a morning it was worth getting up early and coming to try this out. This is my first time back in this seat in, I think, 6 weeks or so. I was here briefly to introduce Frank last week, but I've had a major medical adventure with brain surgery and clipping an aneurysm and 2 inches in here. So my recovery is going remarkably well. I discovered this morning another signpost. I feed the dogs, and I feed one of my dogs, I feed outside, so the other dog doesn't get it. And I'm bending over, and it's a step down from the door. So it's a deep bend. And I realized there was a little fear, because for a while, every time I bent over like that, there was pain in the interior, feeling like in the interior of my head. And I did it this morning, and the fear was there, but the unpleasant sensation wasn't. So it's another sign that the healing is really happening. There's still energy. My energy kind of goes along like this. But that's pretty wonderful. So please, I invite us. If you wish, you can simply stay quiet and in yourself, but I encourage you, turn to a neighbor, tell them who you are or who you think you are. Tell them who you pose as, and something you're grateful for in your life this morning, something that's actually there. So please take a moment to do that. Not long. Across southern France. Come on in. as I experienced deep under the effects of the hangover of 6 hours of general anesthetic and then some pretty heavy-duty anti-seizure meds, the most I could do in practice was to remember the refuges. I take refuge in the Buddha. I take refuge in being awake. I take refuge in the Dharma, in the way things actually are, even when they're like this, yep. And I take refuge in the Sangha, the community of practice and the community of caregivers in that case, and the community of PIMC that I would think every now and then, I know there's a lot of people praying for me and holding me in their hearts. It was really quite tangible in a beautiful way. So that aloneness of being out there in drugged out land was lessened by you. Thank you so much. So this is one way of reflecting on these refuge. Betsy Rose wrote this when she was with Thich Nhat Hanh, probably 20 years ago now. So please join in as you wish. I take refuge in the Buddha, the one who shows me the way in this life. Namo Buddhaya, Namo Buddhaya, Namo Buddhaya. I take refuge in the Dharma, the way of understanding and love. Namo Dharmaya, Namo Dharmaya, Namo Dharmaya. I take refuge in the Sangha, the community of mindful harmony. Namo Sanghaya, Namo Sanghaya, Namo Sanghaya. Once more, I take refuge in the Buddha, the one who shows me the way in this life. Namo Buddhaya, Namo Buddhaya, Namo Buddhaya. I take refuge in the Dharma, the way of understanding and love. Namo Dharmaya, Namo Dharmaya, Namo Dharmaya. I take refuge in the Sangha, the community of mindful harmony. Namo Sanghaya, Namo Sanghaya, Namo Sanghaya. Melanie, would you go see, would you talk with Rebecca for a minute? Do we need a volunteer? Do you need any more pillows? Well, here we are. The everyday, every moment miracle of being alive is happening right now. Hundreds of millions of conditions have to be just right. Good, yay. These bodies of ours, which are infinitely complex. I was impressed with the complexity, with the picture of my little aneurysm that was big as they go. It was 7 millimeters by 6 on the side of a 2 millimeter artery, kind of like a balloon. But that 2 millimeter artery was in this web of other arteries. How do they all stay organized and functioning? It's so infinitely complex. And in this moment, it's all working. It's all working. And on top of all that physicality, consciousness is here. Can't even take a picture of that. But it is the foundation of it is the ocean we swim in. And the Buddha discovered that it's possible to affect this consciousness, to do something with it that leads to greater happiness and less suffering. That's quite something. And so let's do as humans have done now for thousands of years. Find a way to sit comfortably upright. Not rigid, not striving. I was really shocked and kind of disappointed in a way. 40 years ago when I went to Burma to meet Taungpulu Sayadaw, who was kind of like the Dalai Lama of Burmese Buddhism at that time. And he and his monks didn't sit cross-legged. They didn't sit in chairs. They sat in sling-back recliners. Uncomfortable as hell after a while, but so that you see them at the beach sometimes. There's a bar here and a bar here, and then this sling of canvas. They did sit in them 24 hours a day. They never lay down, which kind of added horror to it for me. It was very difficult, but the notion is to sit comfortably upright so you can pay attention to consciousness. You can do this. You can participate in your own awakening. To do this, we can use our capacity of paying attention. Why not pay attention to the fact that your body is touching your cushion or chair or floor? Why not pay attention to the life in your hands and fingers? Into the life in your face. and the great mystery of breathing in and breathing out. Since the moment you were born, millions of times, breathing in, breathing out. Usually it happens unconsciously. And we share this breathing, of course, with dogs and cats and cows and elephants and even fish in their own way as they propel themselves through the water and their gills pull oxygen out. Breathing in, breathing out. And we can bring knowing to it, consciousness, mindfulness. Breathing in and breathing out. And it doesn't help to control the breath. If that does happen, switch to hearing instead of breathing. We have this very convenient home base in the body, breathing in and out. And it will then illuminate when the mind isn't here in the breath, but is elsewhere in thinking or remembering or planning. Or worrying, lost in emotion. Not that these are a problem, they're just what happens. And then, because it's a practice, we can remember to come back to here, sitting, breathing. Notice the life in the chest and abdomen as it breathes. One of the real strengths, blessings of this kind of practice is that there are no interruptions, there are no distractions. We use the breath as a chosen primary object to provide orientation. This is the direction I set my gyro compass at. I want to go this way. But then I discover that I've gone that way. How useful. And this intention to go one way and then discovering something else ultimately lets us explore our whole personality. This whole earth suit that we wear. We can notice the liking and disliking of the mind. We learn its habits. We learn how it causes suffering. It's helpful to remove all violence and coercion from our practice. It's a challenge. We hold the intention of being with the breath, but also the intention of being awake to and accepting everything else that happens. Everything else. As the mind becomes more sensitive, and to help it become more attentive, we can practice noticing the very beginning of each breath. The body is at rest, no breathing. And then an impulse arises to breathe in. And we abide in the sensations of breathing in. And then it gets full, and then there's breathing out. after a little while, discomforts will become apparent in the body. And it's not by accident that we do our best to sit still and just observe them. Insight meditation has as one of its design features a willingness to be present with experiences which were previously intolerable. Experiences which would lead us to move, to turn on entertainment, to use intoxicants, to flee. But we learn to face what the Buddha called dukkha, the unsatisfactory aspects of life. Not out of masochism, but out of the longing for freedom. So if there's discomfort, notice the discomfort. If it persists, put aside the breath and then live totally intimately with that discomfort. Imagine for a moment that you're a visitor from extraterrestrial haunts. And you've dropped into this body-mind, and it's totally new to you. What's happening? How much is the mind wandering? Is there dissatisfaction, perhaps, or great ease? Maybe the mind is profoundly concentrated on the breath, or maybe there's some discomfort somewhere that's being kind of pesky. Is this a mind that's trying to get somewhere else, or is it willing to be here with what is? Is it wide awake or sleepy and dull? the body breathes. Invoking awareness to be present with what's happening. Please now notice where the body touches the cushion or the floor. Notice the life in your hands, fingers. In your feet and legs. In the pelvis, and sacrum and back. In the abdomen and chest. Notice the life in your face. Lips, cheeks, tongue, eyes. Notice how you can, simply by willing it, move the eyes inside their sockets. You can make circles or figure eights or and then we can become aware of not seeing. And then willing the eyes to open, willing the eyelids to rise. Let that happen slowly. And the miracle of vision begins. Objects leap into being. And then, quite possibly, probably your body might like to stretch a little bit. But before you stretch, notice what you're going to do. Notice how the body wants to stretch. And then let it do that, but be present in it. And now what I think of as the simple sanity test. Do you feel more sane than when you walked in? Please raise your hand. 35 minutes. It's nothing. I mean, we could have watched another episode in a TV series in that time. And so who experienced really strong concentration, at least for moments on this? Yeah. How about really wild, restless? And you're allowed to vote twice, of course, in all How about sleepy dullness? Yeah. How about crisp awareness, really wide awake? How about pleasure and dukkha, unpleasantness? How about bodily pain? How about fear? Loneliness? How about great ease? A lot going on, huh? It's really quite remarkable. One of my, when I mentioned fear, one of the experiences that occurred in the ICU for me was tremendous fear. It was, and it came in way, sometimes I have fear, but I haven't had anything like this in forever. But it came across my chest, seemed to come in from the left side, and there would just be this, a life and death sort of feeling. It was, I was caught in some delusional, kind of almost psychotic trance state that there was some decision I had to make that I didn't have adequate data for. And the decision had to be made or I wouldn't survive. And it seemed to me like that went on for days. There weren't days, but it was really quite remarkable to feel that fear, which I think is part of mammals. And then to notice it would be there and then it would go away and then come back. So we get to traverse lots of interesting terrain in a lifetime. So it's one of the reasons that I think it makes so much sense to practice. That's what I want to talk about today. Already am. I just noticed how nice it was to stop talking and just sit here and breathe. Well, Jim, would you like to do a little movement practice with people? What will happen for those of you that are here for the first time? Jim's going to do a few minutes of movement practice. I'm going to go visit with the children for a little bit. And then I've come back and we'll have a very short announcement this morning. And then I think if I'm brave enough, I'm going to sing a song and talk about what do we really know? What do I really know? And what's the difference between fantasies and ideas that we have and what we really know? And in the realm of spirituality, there is so much of both of those. So, Mr. Dalton, we'll do that. I'll talk about that. And then we have coffee and tea. And there's some really terrific people that gathered together through that door and down. They look a lot like the people in here, but they talk. Sir. Oh, he still managed to get up. Good.
One more day.
It's on. Yeah, one more day.
So getting in touch with our feet on the floor, we just scan a little bit of the lower part of the body. How do the feet meet the floor? What's happening down there? Maybe lift the toes, and lift the heels, and see how complicated things can get. Just a little bit of movement on one side of the foot travels in waves across the whole sole of the foot, front to back, left to right. Sensations firing off with any little change. And the change depends a whole lot on where this center of gravity is between the hips. But feel how flexible and mobile and adaptable the hip joint is. It's not like the elbow that just lifts and drops and lifts and drops. The hip has all kinds of movement, sideways, backwards, left and right, front and back. Same with the shoulders. We can move the shoulders a little bit. Feel the circles of movements. And then sink. Let the arms rise. And sink again. And notice the difference in the sensations once we get warmed up a little bit. The more we do this, the better it feels. I hope. Most of the time it works that way. And then we'll experiment a little more by lifting and opening, expanding the breath, and sinking. More energy, more oxygen, change of mood. We're more open to our experience with our arms spread out. And then reaching overhead, painting a rainbow. And then releasing that position and sinking, crossing the wrists. Feel the open the arms a little bit and then cross the wrists again and feel the shoulder blades. They respond with complexity where your hands are. Come up the center. And then when you open, the shoulder blades change again. So we give ourselves a little massage in the upper spine by reaching for the clouds and separating the clouds, sinking, separating again. Places that we hold a lot of tension in our shoulders start warming up and softening. Then with the hips again, pull one hip back, push with a hand, pull the other hip back, pull in and push at the same time. All these amazing positions that the tendons and muscles and ligaments can act out, freeing us into lots of different mobility. Moving the arms back, exploring the shoulder socket. That used to be more fun than it is now. All right. Reaching across and releasing. Feeling the weight shift left and right. Complexity in the bottoms of the feet, in the hips, in the shoulders, in the spine. This general feeling of fluidity, flowing upward to one side and upward to the other. And then exploring what happens in the back. over your one shoulder, and then over the other. Gazing at the moon. We haven't had a chance to do that for several days. We'll have to do it in our imagination. Pressing across. Soft hands, soft wrists. What can be released in the shoulders, in the spine? And then lifting one arm across for cloud hands, imagining a cloud moving across the sky, switching a new cloud with the shadow following on the earth. The amazing coordination that our nervous system has. We're focused on the cloud, but we're aware of the shadow that's tied in, synchronized with the cloud. That's our nervous system understanding elemental forces across the other side of the body. One arm is low, one arm is high, but everybody knows where everybody else is. How does it do that? Once you start the gesture, it just sort of flows along. I'm liable to do that all day. Okay, let's move a little bit. And we'll step out and splash in the sea, rock back and lift the toe, and watch the mood change. Larger movements. Releases different capacities in the body, and just there's a upswelling of energy lifting the arms. And switch, do it on the other side. I was doing this yesterday in a playground area. My friends do Tai Chi every Saturday morning. The rain was pouring down, so we were under the shelter on a cement pad, and I really missed the floor. What we had was squawking gulls and crows. The rain wasn't enough for the crows. They were bathing in the puddles in the soccer field. Why would they do that? Mystery. Open the arms, palms up, palms down. So it was a lesson in acceptance. Crows said, "It's raining, I might as well take a bath." Very odd, from my point of view. They were totally happy. Okay, back to the center. Bringing our energy into a column. Making a fist, sinking, rising like a dragon out of the sea, feeling that sense of agency, energy with direction and focus. There's a certain flavor in our emotional body. And then spreading our wings, going up on the toes. Flying with the cranes and the herons. The geese were flying in the rain yesterday. Very conscious of that. Turning the wheel. All that rain didn't inhibit them at all. change direction. And back to the center. Finding our balance, we'll bounce a ball, one arm and one leg on opposite sides of the body. How does the nervous system put that together? Marvelous. And then just organizing in a simple movement of breathing in and breathing out, visibly drawing energy into the body, letting it all flow out when it's full, finding that emptiness and filling it. Every breath on loan. We can't hold it. Rhythm is everything. And then coming to stillness, there's still rhythm. Feel the different rhythms throughout the nervous system. Sensations lower in the body, hopefully different from when we started. More relaxed shoulders, relaxed jaw and neck, arms and hands. Tingling in different parts of the body. Hearing. Sinking, opening. So, thank you very much for another practice session. I'll be back on track on the third week of January for some more Qigong here on Saturday morning.
Thank you, sir.
All righty.
Close. I'd like to take a moment to speak of the experience of gratitude. What time is it? I said goodbye to Frank Later, who taught here last Sunday. He's flying. He's driving to Seattle, SeaTac, and then flying. His sister, I think, works for Lufthansa, and he gets to fly standby, and it's iffy. Last year he was in a jump seat all the way from Frankfurt to those little straight back things. But anyway, we reminisced yesterday about Ruth Dennison, and I think he said she was his teacher for 35 years, and she was mine for 42. And if you'll notice sometime, I invite you to, that above the door, on the transom above the door, there's on the outside, there's a brass sign that says Ruth Dennison Dhammadina Meditation Hall. Well, that was there for a very specific reason, to show her particularly, but when she wrote that first check for $10,000, she said, I considered giving you the money DOD, but which means, she said, delivery on death. But I thought I would like to see my name on something. So when I first brought her here, I brought her in the front door and said, well, there it is. But I wouldn't be sitting here if it weren't for Ruth, and neither would you. This building wouldn't exist. And then beyond her, the Buddha and all that lineage of 120 to 140 teacher-student connections that make this living Dharma happen. And then there's 100 gazillion things to be grateful for, like no shooting nearby right now. We have more than enough water. I lived in Australia for about a year, 11 months. And some of the places we hear about, they're having unprecedented fires. And I hitchhiked right through those places. So that's not happening here. We have so much. We have plenty of water. So just gratitude. And I'm grateful to be able to play this role. I'm thankful to you for that. I have a few announcements I want to share. One is we have our donations for the Transition Project, which helps people move off the streets and into housing. And boy, getting off the streets at this time of year sounds like a great plan, doesn't it? So I encourage you to go through your closet and see what there is that you could share. Make more room in the closet, too. We have a lot happening at PIMC. And the way to know about it is to be signed up on the constant contact list. And the easiest way to do that is go onto the website and sign up. And if you do, when you do that, when you receive it, if you just click on it, open it, that helps us a lot because we actually know how many people are reading it. And it's where Gregory and Gregory's wife's name, Molly, are doing an amazing job of getting our advertising thing much more streamlined, and you're not getting tons and tons of emails. And Molly is donating 20 hours a month to pulling this whole thing together. So that's a way to get all this information, and I'm going to just do a few highlights here. This is the list. I mean, this place is hopping. Gregory's Wednesday night class is wonderful, and so we now have Monday night there's a book group. Tuesday morning there's a small gathering, self-led group. Tuesday night is Gary's group. Gregory is now on Wednesdays. Doug is on Thursdays. And then there's all the things that happen on the weekends. So you can plug in a lot. There's a mindful hike coming up on the 28th. Oh, here's one. It reminded me. On New Year's Eve, come on here. The time, I'm not sure if we decided that yet, but it'll be 8 or 9. And we gather, we sit a little bit, and then there's a grief ritual that we do that I've actually done for a couple of decades, in which we have a stainless steel bowl in the middle of the room, and we have stones, and you're invited to bring your own stones if you want. And we chant, and people are invited to come into the center of the room and drop your stones, and there's lots of candles. We turn off the smoke detector. And little pieces of paper we'll have smaller pieces of paper this year because it got a little out of hand. But you can write something you're ready to give. You're ready. It did. We had kind of like a a gathering of the candles all into one flaming thing. But you can write something you want to let go of and then put it in the bowl. And then we do some more sitting, and we chant the refuges and precepts, and then we launch into the new year. So, boy, early in the year, Gary's class, the Foundations of Practice, starts then. There's the regular Sunday, first Sunday of the month retreats. Oh my goodness. First Saturday, yeah, thank you. We have another end-of-life doula 101 workshop. We're partnering with these 4 women who help us in what to do at the end of life. I'm actually leaving after this morning to go be with a student who's dying imminently, and they have used these 4 women really a lot to help them along the way. There's a skillful speech, nonviolent communication practice group coming up January 14th. Doug's Basics of Mindfulness, Qigong with Jim. Movie nights coming up mid-January. Doug Pullen, he's busy, isn't he? He's doing a day-long on self-compassion. So, I think that's all I'm going to say about that. This is a printout of the Constant Contact mailing that just went out a few days ago. We come to the end of our financial year with a $10,000 deficit, which isn't a lot on a $190,000 budget. So we came pretty darn close this year. And so we're making a request to fill that in. Some of you got letters, many of you got emails. If you didn't get them, you're welcome to take one of these or just go to the website. I was hoping to connect with Gregory this morning, and we didn't, to see where we are with it. But we have someone who has offered $4,000 as a matching gift, and I know a bunch of that has come in. So we can probably close that, and it'd be great if we do. And why do we need that? Well, this building is a real building, and it requires what real buildings do. So I invite you. You can also use the Donna Bowl or the Donna box back there. And maybe even consider doing a monthly contribution, which is the Stewardship Circle. And if you're doing that, you might consider for next year doing a little more. So. All right. Linda, would you grab me a glass of water? Thanks. Thank you. So I found myself in some pretty challenging circumstances recently. The kind of circumstances that throw us back onto, what do I know? How can I survive this? Or how can I deal with this level of pain or confusion and that throws us back onto our worldview, onto our faith tradition, our practice tradition. And I had several delusions, I would like to say semi-conscious, but I think they were quite unconscious fantasies blown up. My mother had a catastrophic stroke at about 2 years older than I am now. And she was in a wheelchair and in a nursing home for the next 6 or 7 years before she finally died of pneumonia. At the time of her stroke, her shoulder got dislocated, so her arm was like this, and her speech was significantly affected, and her emotions. And it was rough. And Ruth Dennison died of a stroke at 95. And I've had strokes in my family. Fair lot of them, actually. My father died of a heart attack, secondary to emphysema and alcoholism. So I had some delusional protections, and I thought, well, I really take pretty good care of my diet and my lipid levels in my blood are really excellent. And I take a statin, and I take an aspirin, and I exercise some, and my resting heart rate is 50 to 55. I never smoked cigarettes much, ever. And so on. And so therefore, I'm not going to have a stroke. And then there I was on the airplane with some numbness in the left foot in my hand, and then I was in the hospital with a stroke, mild, but what the hell? Because I'm not going to be like my parents. Just a little sadness. That could have been the aneurysm blowing, in which case I would probably have died. And that's in the face of my teaching for how many decades now? Sabbe Sankhara Anicca, all things are impermanent. But I had the sense that I could somehow or another just live well. Oh, plus My parents didn't meditate. They were depressed and they were lonely. And. And I'm speaking of it with a little bit of humor, but it really has hit me pretty darn substantially that my denials are fantasies. Because I don't know if I'm going to get up off this chair. And I would propose, neither do any of us know. And it brings that teaching on impermanence so to the fore that we really are living one nanosecond to the next in a world which is remarkably out of control. So what do I know? What comes from all these years of spiritual practice? And well, I think the Four Noble Truths are true. Oh, I want to get something. I have a prop. I think I have a prop. Back here into the hot tub room. One of these arrows I found sticking in the ground in the backyard here 10 years ago. So, how many of you know the Four Noble Truths? Oh, good. There's some that will be new for. That hanging on the back wall, on the right-hand side of the back wall, with the Buddha sitting there and 5 monks sitting in front of him, that's an image of the first sermon the Buddha taught. It's called the Dhammachakrapavatana Sutta, and that will be on the test. It just says the wheel of the Dharma, putting in motion the wheel of the Dharma was the first teaching. He'd been practicing with these guys, and then they left him, and then when he had his big breakthrough, and then he found them. And he then said, I found it. I have found the way that we've all been seeking. And then he taught the Four Noble Truths. So the first one, the first noble truth is that there's lots of pain and suffering in our lives. And that too I keep discovering I have lots of denial about. The traditional list is birth, sickness, old age, decay, and death. It's one thing to know about it. I mean, when I go by hospitals, I often think about the people that are in there and wish them well. Whenever I go to Breitenbush to teach, which I'm doing in a few days, I pass Oregon's maximum security prison and then a medium security one as you get on Highway 22. And I always think of the people in there. I've been inside the Max prison once, many years ago, teaching a class on cults, the cult phenomenon. But I think about the folks in there that are suffering mightily, staff and inmates. But having been in the hospital, it's fresher. And all those rooms that, on those, when I started to be able to get out of bed on the second day post-surgery, and going by those rooms, and there's all those people in there wrapped up in, in their hospital beds, and it's it's happening right now, right? So, not to get stuck on that, but and there's all those disappointments. Oh, I have a disappointment story I want to share. This is the season of commercially supported disappointment. Reminds me, I once heard Robert Bly say there should be a sign over every entrance to every mall. You can never get enough of what you don't really want. And we do quite a number on our kids with this Santa Claus strangeness. When my daughter Tara was 4 or 5, she was watching TV and she saw little Dolly someone who danced and sang, and she really wanted Santa to bring her little Dolly, whoever it was. And so she was well within our budget, and we were playing the game. And so we got it for her. And she opened it up on Christmas morning, and she was so excited. And then she said, "Daddy, where's the music?" So just be sure that any gifts you give for Christmas, you include the music. Right? But disappointment. There's so much. We get so disappointed because we have fantasies about things. I'm pretty disappointed that my body is really as vulnerable as it is. And it's part of that fear that emerged. It can do that. So this is a given. Birth, sickness, old age, decay, death. What about this second arrow? It can be, it's kind of like ultimate chopsticks here. If this is the first ennobling truth, the truth of dukkha, there's a second truth, which is on top of these inevitable losses, sufferings, injuries, sickness, failures, there's something else that happens which has to do with making it all many times worse. And that's the condition or the phenomenon in the human mind that says it shouldn't be like this. This should not be happening. I should not be suffering like this. This pain should not exist. And it's here that the Buddha, brilliant discovery, and I think I know this, at least, except in the places I don't, that this is removable. If we're awake enough, if we're mindful enough. One of the things that I struggled with in the hospital in that incredibly drug-addled state was one of these which said, wait, I've been meditating for 45 years. Isn't there something wrong with me or my practice that I'm not in a place of bliss, observing, oh yes, here's this person in a drug-addled state, but I am the great infinite void, and so therefore, what's the big deal? right? Oh, now he's having thoughts that he's going to die. So what? Right? What is it, 14.2 billion years of universe, and then he gets born, and then he makes a big deal out of the fact that he's going to die and go back to being another 14.2 years. That caused a lot of suffering. I shouldn't be having this experience. And I thought of, this is awkward. No, I'm going to keep it in there. It's awkward. It's dukkha, damn it. And I think it was here. Did Philip Moffat come here? Yeah. Anyway, Philip Moffat, a very famous spirit rock teacher, who was the owner of Esquire magazine before he became a Dharma teacher. Owner and publisher. Anyway, Philip said something very helpful that I good to remember, which is, Dharma practice doesn't mean you're not going to get bowled over. What it does mean is that you'll pop back up faster. It's like those dolls you get for kids at a certain age. They get sand in the bottom and you bop it and it goes, and then it comes back up. Well, sometimes you can get knocked over and then go off into the second arrow and suffer for a long, long time. Or you can get knocked over and suffer, and then when the head gets a little clearer, maybe the pain level drops some, and then you realize, whoa, I was really kind of out of it there, wasn't I? And now, with great forgiveness and great acceptance, I'm here. I'm going to take this out. I don't want to be reminded of it right now. I don't much thrill at the fact of how much dukkha there is in my blessed life, my life of incredible privilege and always enough food and my own car and central heating and relative health among my loved ones. But I think the truth is that I'll get bowled over again, of course. But what to do in the meantime in order to increase the pop back up factor? I think it's to really dive deeply into the Dharma. And in particular, one of the formulations that's very helpful for me are the 3 characteristics of existence. That truth that everything's impermanent. I've had a significant vaccination or another inoculation. Things really are all impermanent. And it's not a nice philosophy. It's actually the truth. And so, how then shall I live? What shall I do? Well, one thing is to practice really deeply and go deeper and deeper into the actual direct experience of impermanence so that one gets inoculated more and more deeply. That's making sense? So one thing I'm talking about here is persons who've had a stroke are quite a lot more likely, like 10 times more likely to have another stroke within the next short period of time. So they want one to get one's blood pressure really under control. One of the medications causes dry mouth now. One more interesting thing to deal with, hydration. Interrupted myself. So it's making sense. Impermanence. The second characteristic is this characteristic of dukkha, or challenge, or difficulty, or the word dukkha translates as, or the origin is from, if you have a wheel, an axle and a wheel, if you throw a little grit in there, that's dukkha, the experience of that. So Have you noticed how life continues to have something not quite the way you want it? I was ready after this hospital trip. Well, good, it's going to be fine for a while. And I have a crown here that's starting to hurt. It's going to be something. And then that fundamental teaching of anatta, of not self. I mean, that's what I was really longing to experience in that place of great pain, which was everything's fine. There's just this incredible pain in your head, and but part of the realization was, I don't make that happen. I can't make that experience happen. It has happened. So I want to go back to the Four Noble Truths, the Four Ennobling Truths. There is suffering, it's real, but it has a cause. And the cause is wanting something to be different. The mind's wanting something different. I want more pleasure, please. I want less pain. Or I want to become something different than this moment so that I can have that rather than this. So you get the three of those. I want something different, more pleasure, less pain, and I want this whole thing to be different. The teachings say, and how deeply do I know this? How deeply do you know this? That if I practice being awake, if I practice being mindful, and can be mindful enough to notice this second arrow, something happens. Is that true? Is it really true? The Buddha called it nirvana, not the band from Seattle and the whiny band from Seattle, not some other planet, but the suffering reduces. The pain can stay the same, but the resistance changes. Is that true? I think it's true. I know it's true in small things. It was challenging with the level of dukkha I was experiencing right after surgery. And then so it really gets down into the nitty-gritty of what do I believe? Why am I practicing? Why are you practicing? Many of us practice just to get a few moments of calm, and that's big. But it does go much deeper, to practice in order to actually be able to, with periods or moments of suffering, to actually have the wherewithal and enough mindfulness and concentration to reflect on it and to realize, wow, this is what's happening, and I can notice how the mind is actually making it, second arrow, much worse with worrying or resisting, resenting, blaming. I talked to someone recently who is chronically angry and blaming of people. And it became so clear to me that that all that anger and blaming is about avoiding the fact that his life has really got a lot of pain in it and out of control. So, there's dukkha, tanha, grasping, craving, wanting it to be different. And there's this sweet relief that comes when somehow or another we relinquish this wanting it to be different and accept it as it is. Which doesn't mean we don't change the circle. You have your hand caught in a something. It doesn't mean you say, oh, my hand's hurting. Oh, well, I'll just get used to it. Of course, we move our hand. Or if you see someone harming someone else, maybe harming a child, of course you stop them if you can. So I guess I'm going to ask, what do you think? What do you know? Do these, and the fourth ennobling truth is the rest of the Eightfold Path. The way we go about developing a mind which is capable of doing this work and developing a moral and ethical behavioral capacity which allows the mind to actually get quieter. So what do you know about this? Or do you have a question? How do you deal with it when the dukkha really comes along? Not all at once, please. Hang on. Let's use the microphone. Well, actually you do, because other people won't hear you, particularly the people who are on the net. It's hard to see them in there, but they are in there. They tell me they...
So the third part of that, which is anatta, or no self.
Anicca, dukkha, anatta, yes.
Yes. I think it's a really under-observed, and Jim, we talked about this before also. I think it's a really under-observed part of this relief of suffering. The labels that we give ourselves are a type of prison that keep us from seeing that we are one with each other. And there's a marvelous story called The Egg, where a being in a God being in its fetus stage has to become every one of us to evolve to the Godhead. And I think in this age we are obsessed with identity, and it's a real tragedy how much suffering we create for ourselves around identity. And I'm just interested in your perspective on that.
Thank you. Huge question, isn't it? I mean, that's the question. I've read lots and lots of spiritual books, Buddhist and otherwise. And I find it very interesting how certain little snippets come in and then form a belief system. And one little snippet that I discovered in the last several weeks that caused quite a bit of suffering for me was from Ram Dass's book, Be Here Now. How many of you read Be Here Now? Quite a few. Really a seminal book for meditation and spirituality in the West. Well, one of the things that I read was that Ram Dass, who was in India, had with him a little packet of LSD, and which had been very important in his development, and his getting thrown out of Harvard, where he was giving it to students to experiment with consciousness. But Neem Karoli Baba, his guru there, who was famous beyond measure, and he said to Ram Dass one day, "Give me the medicine." And he said, "What do you mean, give you the medicine?" He said, "Give me the medicine." And he said, "Oh, do you want to try some LSD?" And he said, "Give me the medicine." So he gave him the bottle, and Neem Karoli Baba just took them all. And then Ram Dass watched all day to see what would happen. And what he said was, every now and then, Neem Karoli Baba would look over at him, and twinkle. And it had no effect on him. So what I heard in that was Neem Karoli Baba inhabited a state in which his system would be dealing with this incredible consciousness-altering substance, and it would make no difference. And I realized that I had incorporated the belief that even though I'm no Neem Karoli Baba, after 40 years, I shouldn't get so blown out of the water by a mere dose of Keppra, which was toxic to my system. And having had 6 hours of a hole in my head, and that there was something wrong with my practice because I was deeply affected by this traumatizing medical procedure that was happening. That's a pretty crazy belief. That, and this is coming back to your anatta question. Funny, it feels a little bit like a heresy to talk like this, but maybe there's also the issue that we have to really accept our separateness. We have to really accept our incarnation and the normalness of our incarnation. And we can use the anatta teaching to then make what's a normal human incarnation somehow or another wrong and bad. Right? I should be able to recognize the, quote, Godhead. I should be able to, another line from a book that affected me was, what was his name? Shamanic books 20 years ago. Carlos Castaneda, thank you. There's a line in there where Don Juan, his teacher, says, the earth is so vast, the mother, I want to hug her, but the best I can do is dissolve and swim around inside her. And what a nice thing to be able to do, to escape from my separateness and be the one at will. People write about that. Great spiritual masters write about that kind of thing. But can I do that? No. Can you? I'd like to, I think. But to accept the reality of who is this incarnation right now is to not live in a fantasy, but to live in, this is what I'm capable of. This is what's real. It's funny, I'm struggling to say this as clearly as I'd like to. I think it's because it's not ultimately clear for me. But there is something about accepting accepting our incarnation, accepting our birth. And I was around and with Ruth Denison in the last couple or 3 years of her life, a fair bit, and the last 11 days of her life, and it wasn't easy for her. It wasn't, oh well, What I'm not wanting is for this to be a big downer. Because there is something which is there for us, which is that we rebound quickly. And even in the heart of it, there's something in us that can know what's happening. Paul.
When you ask the question, what do I know? I'm at a point in my practice now where I'm willing to get into the semantics of that little question, that phrase. What do I know? And I want to pick apart the know, because I'm at a point now where I chuckle when I hear that word know, like there's some sort of definitive fact. And there's been enough cycling in my practice in facing things, facing shadows, facing challenges, where there was a point in practice where there was a bit of hubris. I got this, I can handle the next thing. Bad news, Paul.
What was that?
Bad news, Paul. You don't got this one. Then it's going to be a new opportunity for learning or facing and leaning into a different aspect of the suffering. We live in a world full of so many surprises now, right? I mean, this is the age of chaos, and everything we think we know so easily gets upturned. So I chuckle at that word "no." I spend 5 days a week working in a job where I have to speak with authority and opinion and importance, and that opinion and importance very clearly to me is attached to the little me that knows, right? I know what's right and wrong. I know what decision to make. I know about compliance. I know about rules and practices and things like that. And I also know that that's a big laugh. So it's in that knowing, like what do we consider a hard fact? It's interesting, and I think it's worth teasing that apart for me. So as I've been softening into the practice and softening into the flow of change, and watching that each time, each reiteration of a challenge or a suffering or pain, is present, that there's going to be a varying degree of intensity that's going to either waylay me for a couple of hours, a couple of days, whatever. It's going to take some time to reprocess, and that's fine now. Because what's happened is there's now, instead of knowing, there's like a little bit of confidence, there's a little bit of faith. And that faith builds on itself because there's these things you can do. There are these practices. You've got these teachers who have gone before you and have shared so much of their wisdom and knowledge and experience. And everyone in this room who has shared their challenges and everything like that, even if you have nothing in common with them, you think you have nothing in common with them, you have something in common with them. We all, when we share these challenges, it helps each other. We all help each other in understanding that there's ways through this. There's often always a way through this. So what comes to mind is the awakening factor of resilience, right? That's the bouncing back, right? There's that confidence in the practice. Yeah, knock down. The intensity may be of varying degrees. You come up when you come up. But it's that confidence in knowing that there are tools, there's community.
Is
and I've done this
related?
before, and I'll do it again. Sorry.
Is it related for you at all to the refuges?
Oh, no, without a doubt. I mean, without the Sangha, without the lineage of teachers, granted it took me walking through that door a few years back, but
Yeah.
if I walked through the door and there was no Sangha, empty effort.
Thanks.
I'm Denise. It touches my heart to hear you talk about the Four Noble Truths, because when I came first time 2 years ago, I think it was in the first or the second Sunday that I was here where you talked about the Noble Truths. When I came, I wasn't broken, but I was damn near broken, and I came out of desperation. So the first time I heard you talk about dukkha and suffering, and then you dropped some kind of hint that you had some kind of way of dealing with this dukkha in a better way, caught my attention. And 2 years later, when I first came here, I cried out of pain. Now I cry out of gratitude. The classes that I have taken and the people that I have met and the things that I have learned, I really have so much more better control over turning down the volume of my suffering now. And it's because of the people here and the things that I have learned, and I am grateful.
So there really is a second arrow, and you know a lot about it now. Yeah. Aren't we lucky? I think actually this is an absurd statement, but developing mindfulness and doing that in the community of friends is probably a more effective treatment for dukkha than shopping. You think it's right? Kirsten, please.
Hi, it's nice to be back. I've just been reflecting a lot about Clay's comment and your response to it. And for those of you who don't know me, I'm Kirsten, and I've been away. This is my community, but I'm at Naropa in Boulder, and so much of this first semester in my contemplative psychotherapy and Buddhist psychology master's program is about. This first semester is about turning inward and really looking at our own what's here for each of us in kind of a small self way, but also the broader picture. And there's been a lot for me about discovering the layers of my identity that I have for so long suppressed, much from growing up Catholic and things that are not accepted, and also others in my cohort who have what's called, target identities, minorities, people who are, one of my friends is in the midst of transition, is a trans person. And there's so much about, really, Robert often frames it as like, we need to be someone before we can be no one. This really coming to accept what we are, whatever that is, in this body, this small self, this being that's walking through the world and the way that it relates to the world around it. Because there's so much coming at us all the time from the culture and the family and everything else that's saying, no, you need to be different than that. That's not the right way to be. And so for me, I'm like getting a really deep dose and understanding of how much shadow work there is in that, how much pain there is in that, and realizing that to face that with what at Naropa we say Maitri because it's Shambhala Buddhism, but metta, loving kindness, is a really important step before you can ever begin to see yourself as this one consciousness. And so I think, it can be really self-aggressive, like we were talking about, to not accept that part, the part of us that has an identity. So I just felt compelled to share that. So.
I spent most of the last 14 years in and out of pretty severe chronic illness with some nice bouts of health in between. And one of the stories that would come up amidst that physical suffering is, I deserve this or I don't deserve this. And that came from me, but it also came from other people. Some people would say, oh, that shouldn't happen to such a good person, or you didn't do enough to protect yourself, or you're not doing enough now to get yourself better. And and yeah, just looking at that story and other stories that would come up about trying to make sense of why it was happening, because it didn't make sense. And eventually just coming, after 14 years, eventually, much more before that, eventually you come to a place of like, well, this is just how it is. I get sick. Some people get really sick. Some people die. Some people get sick for a long time. Some people only get sick for a week. And that place of acceptance makes it much easier, not just to like be with it emotionally, but also even the stress of the physical stuff itself, like the compounding stories create anxiety or anger or depression, which then makes all the physical symptoms that much worse, or if you're having a heart attack and you're stressed about the heart attack because it shouldn't be happening, can make the heart attack that much more difficult or dangerous. So I just wanted to share that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Is there activity behind the door? Can you hear anything? Anybody sitting with anything wanting to be said, please?
Good morning, everyone. I'm Michael. This is a real, excuse me, a real short one. This was something my Uncle Paul told me when I graduated from engineering school, a bachelor's degree. He said, the more you know, the more you realize how little you know. And I found it to be extremely true. So thanks, Paul. You kind of triggered that memory for me.
Thank you. We're good? Pull the barrier, let them in. Thank you all for being here today. I hope this is helpful. Please practice it. This is a great time, a great season to sit a lot. And please come join us in the middle, be with the kids, and we'll do a little blessing. Is the microphone floating around there somewhere? Oh, it's there. Duh. They're ahead of me. Hey. You did give him a ton of sugar? Oh, I see. Hi. Are you missing teeth? You are. Wow. That's exciting. May I? Thank you. Thank you. Well, here we are holding living hands. Give the hand in your left a little squeeze and let that hand squeeze back too. Let's do a little hand squeezing. We can signal remarkably in this contact. I know you're there. So let's give the hand on the right a little squeeze and wish this person well. What would be your most generous wish, prayer? And the person on your left, give that hand a squeeze. And how about the person between these hands? What would you wish for this person? And to all of us in these circles, to all of us that have ever been in this room, to our friends and neighbors around us, and to all beings who at this moment live on this little planet, this little dust speck, our friends who are of the air, of the earth, the waters, the ground, underground. In a way, it's resting back in our infinitely complex web of life. And are we ready? She's going to do it. Oh, wow, okay. May all beings be happy. May all beings be happy. May all beings be happy. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Thank you. That was great.
What does that say two?
Hmm?
I heard two on that.
Oh, number 2? Well, there used to be a number 1. Oh, there's a number 1 and number 2. In the sound room, there's little knobs of what, if you want to make this one louder, you turn up number 2. It's the part of the controls. I can show you after if you want. We can look in there. Oh, well, we're doing the blowing out. Are we ready? Are you ready? Do you have a wish? Have you got a wish? Do you all have a wish? Those of you on the internet, you can do it too. So, let's take a giant breath in. 1, 2, 3, blow. Whoa, that was definite. Thank you. Yay. Thank you for joining us. Thank you all for joining us. And do have a sane, loving, generous next few days, as best you can. All right. Thank you.
Don't leave yet. We still have one more thing. We have to sing happy birthday to Robert. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday.